Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Welcome. I'm Diane Crocker. I am the principal analyst at LightBox, and I'm the host of today's event, The Past, Present, and Future of Women in Commercial Real Estate. This LinkedIn event is hosted by the LightBox Diversity and Inclusion Council, which we formed last year, and it's really to drive insights that we can build upon and integrate into our evolving corporate culture with a focus on raising awareness and support. LightBox is the world's leading proprietary intelligence platform. We integrate real estate and location data solutions and facilitate industry connections with clients who range from technology companies, commercial real estate lenders, investors, brokers, engineers, government agencies, and real estate developers. Our goal is to empower competent, data-driven decisions across sectors. So now to today's topic. Increasing diversity and inclusion is one of the most important challenges in today's business world, and it's really a central area of focus here at LightBox. As a company with a wide variety that I just mentioned, we really believe that a diverse workforce is crucial to our success. I'm a very proud member of that Diversity and Inclusion Council, and I'm very, very honored to be here today with some of my favorite women in commercial real estate. As Women's History Month comes to an end here on the East Coast, we're closing in on 5 o'clock here, and this is the last day of March, of course. I have here with me, as I said, 5 exceptional female leaders. I chose them carefully to represent different sectors of the commercial real estate ecosystem, but also because each of them has influenced me, has inspired me, and I know that they've influenced countless other women across our industry. So by way of introduction, here they are. First is Annemarie DiCola. She is the CEO of TREP in Manhattan. Annemarie feels a little bit like family to me because we used to work at sister companies under the same parent when we first met. As CEO of TREP, she spearheads its business as the global leader in the CMBS industry, expanding its expertise and solutions into the broader commercial real estate, finance, and banking sectors. Second, we have Judy Nitsch, the founder and principal of Nitsch Engineering, a Boston-based engineering firm that she founded in 1989. I know her through my Boston chapter of Commercial Real Estate Women, or CRE network. Judy has a long, long list of impressive achievements, and among them are her efforts to give back to the community by supporting STEM initiatives and by starting Introduce a Girl to Engineering Day. Third is Lexi Moriarty. She is our West Coast panelist who just stepped into her role as president of the LA chapter of CRE. Lexi founded Axia Real Estate Advisors to help owners and users of commercial real estate realize more value through active asset management of their properties. Fourth, we have Christina Roush. She is based in Las Vegas, and she serves as managing principal for Cushman & Wakefield, where she leads strategy for the firm's Nevada market. Her operational oversight extends to multiple service lines, including brokerage, property management, valuation and advisory, and private capital investment sales. And then last but not least is Heidi Learner. She is a well-respected commercial real estate economist and quantitative strategist, whom I met years ago when we were on an MBA of New York panel together. She is a terrific market trend storyteller who has held positions across the industry at State Street, Saville Studley, and CBRE. Today, we will be focusing our conversation on progress for women in commercial real estate, advice for the next generation of leaders, and what the future might hold. So the format is I'm going to introduce each of them one-on-one briefly, and then we will bring them all back at the end for a final question. And in time remaining, I'm happy to address any questions that attendees put in the comments box, and we can pose those to each of the panelists. So let's go ahead and start with you, Annemarie. Thank you for being here, first of all.
Diane, thank you for asking me to join you and such a wonderful panel of impressive women. I'm very honored. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so let's jump right into the topic of today's event, the past, the present, the future of women in real estate. Share your thoughts on, where you think we've seen progress. Clearly, we still have some areas where we have some work to do. What's your take on that?
Well, I'll start with a quick story outside of the commercial real estate industry. I'm a member of the Partnership for New York City, and this morning it held its first in-person annual meeting right here in Rock Center. And the keynote speaker was the new mayor of the city and the new police commissioner of the NYPD, Commissioner Sewell, who's the first female police commissioner in the history of the NYPD. And I was really emotional listening to this extraordinary, impressive woman give her plan for the city. And I started thinking of this panel today and say, in general, look how far women have come and how great that is. So we speak about CRE in general, and you know, Diane, my career in this sector has been over 30 years. I certainly have seen a lot of changes since the start of my career. Certainly, there are many more women in commercial real estate as a sector overall, and more women in higher ranking positions, more participation in some of the networks we've mentioned on this call, CRE for one, the CREFC Women's Forum for another. All of that in much larger amounts than anything that existed when I started in this sector. And I think even more initiatives to have more women on deal teams, et cetera. All of that's positive. I certainly want to see us have more than that. I think that what I want to see is more women controlling capital and more women controlling the culture. So that all translates into more women in C-suite positions, something that we need to see. The encouraging signals are the many diversity and inclusion initiatives that many fine companies such as yours, TREP, and many others have, where people are taking an intentional look at all of the benefits of diversity, all of the broad perspectives of thought that brings to problems and solutions, and how much better a company is for having more diversity. What's encouraging also is to see many more companies focus on more development opportunities internally for all their employees, because employees that feel they are growing within a company stay there. And I think women should and can avail themselves of that. And certainly, this is not just about getting more women in certain roles, but creating the opportunities for them to be highly qualified for those roles. So it is not form that we're seeking. It's certainly substance. Those are encouraging signs to me to see in our sector.
I love that. That's great. One of the things I love hearing, and I know the mentees in the LightBox Developing Leaders Mentor Program love to hear the stories about career trajectories of those who went before. You know, as you said, it's makes us feel very hopeful to realize that there are a lot more women in leadership positions now than certainly when we were starting. So I thought it would be interesting for attendees, particularly the mentees in our program, to hear the career trajectory that really brought you to your current position as CEO of TREP.
So yes, thank you for asking that. And certainly it's not what I originally thought of when I was in college planning to go to law school. I did go to law school and fell in love with commercial real estate as a specialty, and started in a law firm after law school, focusing on commercial real estate, loving every minute of it, with every intention of becoming a partner in that fine firm. Except that firm was a victim of the other recession, not the fiscal crisis of 2008 and following, but rather a recession around the 1990s, early 1990s, that hit commercial real estate very hard and hit my law firm very hard. Fortunately, I wasn't yet partner, and in a very tough job market for commercial real estate, I still managed to get a few job offers in law firms, for law firms that were building their bankruptcy practices, where I peddled the fact that knowing as much as I knew after my first few years of commercial real estate legal work, I could be an important part of a bankruptcy team. But I also got an interesting job offer from a company that I had brought to my firm as a client. And that company was a company called TREP. I had become acquainted with the founder from where we both lived in Westchester County. And I had brought them to my firm as a client because they were beginning to analyze these new bonds called commercial mortgage-backed bonds. And what was very interesting is, even though I had this experience that my dream goal of being a law firm partner had been snatched from me by that recession, and I was back at having a few offers from law firms where I knew I would understand the culture and I would succeed, I decided to take the job at TREP because it was different. It was going to teach me something else. And it was very funny to feel that sometimes, even though you're afraid of your dream being snatched from you, when it is, you find yourself far less afraid than you thought. I went in-house at TREP, loved every minute of it, loved being on the inside of a business. It was certainly smaller then, very entrepreneurial. I loved it. As a result, I got involved in all aspects of the company business. And 15 years in, when there was an opportunity to put my hat in the ring to be CEO, I applied for the position and I got the job. And there are many morals to the story. Okay. So always have a plan B. Definitely having a plan, having a goal, having a target, and sticking to it is great. But when you realize it's not feasible anymore, I'm not saying quit, but when it's not feasible, go to plan B. Okay. Don't be afraid of new opportunities. When you're looking at a new plan B and you see an opportunity, don't be afraid to seize it. You know much more than you realize you know. You don't realize how much you know until you're in a new setting and you need to use it and apply it, And I think that, the ultimate moral of the story is that great careers don't have to be linear, and many of them never are. So don't be surprised if there are turns that your career takes. And if you seize those opportunities and realize that you're going to try something new, but bring with it everything you already know and all that experience, it could have incredible, incredible results for you.
Bingo. That's why I love that story, because the mentees in particular in our program are understanding the lesson that exactly what you just said, that, it's great to have a plan, but oftentimes successful careers are not linear. They take twists and turns. You have to be open to opportunities, and in your case, be brave and go for something that maybe was different than what you originally intended.
It was the best thing I ever did. It was the best thing I ever did.
That's fantastic. All right, Annemarie, I'm going to move on to Judy, and I'm going to bring you on at the end to share your tips for moving careers forward. Thanks, Annemarie. Hi, Judy.
Hey, Diane. Glad to be here.
Thank you for being here. I first met you at CRE convention in Houston when you sat next to me, and I think it took about 2 minutes before you started giving me advice. So I knew right out of the gate that you were a natural born teacher and somebody who I should keep in touch with. Thank you for being here. Sure. So I want to have you start with the same question that Annemarie just answered, which is, you founded a major engineering firm in a sector of the industry that is still largely male dominated. So I would love it if you could share your story to what led you to opening that company in 1989.
Sure. So I graduated from WPI, Worcester Polytechnic Institute, in 1975, worked for a smaller engineering firm, but they had a bunch of branch offices, and I took the initiative and wanted to go work in a branch office, thinking I would get a lot more responsibility and it would be a smaller place. I'd be seen by the higher ups. And they didn't have any openings, as it turned out. But then the manager of the office quit to start his own business. And I was asked, would you like to run the office? Mind you, I was 25 years old. And I'm like, sure. Talked to my husband and we said, okay, we can do this. And I often will say that it was a wonderful experience for me, not so much for the company, because they didn't really have someone better to run the office, which is why it came to me. But I gave it my best that I could. And interesting that Annemarie talked about recessions, because my career seemed to revolve around recessions. In 1982, there was another recession where nobody was building. This is when interest rates and construction loan rates were, in the high teens, low 20s. It was very, very difficult to get money for projects. So I started working for a firm in Boston then. Within a year, became on their board of directors. A year later, the name of the firm changed to Allen, Demersion, Major, and Nitsch. So it was kind of neat to have my name on the door. But 7 years later, another recession, and we were approached by a client who had a tremendous real estate portfolio. He wanted to buy the building that we owned plus our business. But as part of the deal, he only wanted 2 of the 3 owners to stay. And he didn't realize what I did. And at the time, I ran the civil engineering department and I was in charge of corporate marketing. So the deal came around that after one meeting where our attorneys, their attorneys, our accountants, their accountants, and their whole team and our side, we're all in a room. I was the only woman. we took a restroom break. One of my business partners came back and said, I don't really think I want to leave, because I was the one that was going to stay. And I said, good, because I don't want to stay. So they all came back and we announced, okay, Jim is going to stay, Judy's going to leave. And nobody batted an eye. I'm like, okay, this was the right decision to make. And I don't think they really understood what was going to happen with my company. But 1989, I started Nitsch Engineering, and it was a tough time. It was a bad recession, but we had enough work to keep ourselves busy. And then we were able to get certified as a women-owned business several years later, and we tripled our sales each of the next 2 years because people knew I really was a civil engineer. We were qualified, and back then there were quite a number of just fronts and shams and firms that really couldn't do real work. So we track our WBE percentage of work every year, and it's down to about 10% of our revenue. It's not a huge part of the firm's business. But I have to say, so I very much am a planner, and I would give this advice to your group at LightBox that you need to have your plan, your next year or two, what are you going to do? But then what's your long-term plan? What do you want to do? And I knew I wanted to have an ownership transition plan at my firm to give other people a chance to run the place and create wealth because they're an owner of a firm. And so I actually retired from my firm 2 years ago tomorrow. And my retirement party hasn't happened yet. That's going to happen in June because of COVID. So I'm still quite engaged with the firm, but I am retired from running the business, and they have a kick-ass awesome team running the business now and have really grown throughout the pandemic. So that's quite exciting to see. The one thing I will add on that, though, is as part of my career, I was always involved in organizations, and I would give that as another piece of advice. I get on a committee, that's where you get to know people. I got on the board, I became president, and all of a sudden you're a leader, and all of a sudden you get asked to do other things. And I was asked to become a trustee at my alma mater. So I've been a emeritus trustee now, but I've been a trustee there for 33 years. And in 2016, I was asked to become a trustee at the Boston Architectural College. So that's my real job now, is that I'm chairman of the board of the Boston Architectural College. And I also serve on 4 boards as an outside director where I'm paid to be a board member. So, long term, that was one of those goals I had, was to be a paid outside director. And that's worked out as well.
You're only retired in name, Judy. You're still as busy as ever. You're just busy on different things.
That's exactly right. Yep.
And you beautifully led into the second question, which is advice that you would give. So that was absolutely perfect. And, I love the advice of raising your hand and taking on, more responsibilities, getting more involved in committees, whether it's CRE or, another industry organization. And then you kind of organically grow from there.
Yeah, and definitely put yourself out of your comfort zone. If you're, a good writer, don't offer to be secretary. If you like numbers, don't offer to be the treasurer. Ask to be the program chair. I always loved being on the program committee because I got to call people that either I didn't know and I wanted to meet, or it was going to be good for me to get to know them or their organization. And so being on the program committee to me was the best thing. Now, a lot of my career I spent doing business development, and just like Annemarie, she brought TREP, she said, into her law firm, and then she went to TREP. I mean, building a business is so important in so many areas of commercial real estate. And that was sort of my sweet spot, getting to know people, getting our name out there. I love talking and honestly bragging about the work that Nitsch Engineering did, because we really do some cool projects. Mm-hmm. And people don't often hear about what the civil engineer does, but it's important with every kind of commercial real estate project that there is. So getting involved and getting to know potential clients who you're bringing in business is really key. For me, I wish I had focused on 2 things earlier in my career. I started to get my master's, and then I was doing so much permitting on projects with planning boards that had night meetings and select boards and things that I had to drop out of getting my master's at night. And I wish I had finished it. Not that it would have made a difference in my career, I don't think, but just for my peace of mind, I'm not one to start something and not finish it. Mm-hmm. But the second piece of advice I would give is I wish I had been more aware of emotional intelligence and been able to work on that more and had focused on it more, because I think things would have been a little better in a lot of ways if I was more aware of my EI and how to be a better person.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I love that. And there are more tools for doing that now than there were years ago. So
that's exactly right.
Okay. So before I let you go, a key takeaway for the attendees is to do scary things that are out of your comfort zone. It gets easier the more you do that, and it opens up areas of opportunity. I love that.
That's exactly right.
Okay, thank you, Judy. We will let you go and we'll bring you back
Okay.
at the end.
Good.
And we'll say hi to Lexi. Hi, Lexi.
Hey there. How
Nice
are
to
you?
see you. Thank you for being here from the sunny West Coast. Well,
Thanks
we're
for
still
having
having
me.
snow and ice in the East Coast. What I want to start with is, we're thinking about women in commercial real estate and the progress that we've made and where we still have work to do. So I'd love for you to tell our attendees, what's really been the most significant barrier that you've experienced in your career and how did you overcome that?
Yeah, the most significant barrier is myself and my own fears. My experience in real estate, commercial real estate, has been really incredibly positive. People have given me so much in terms of their expertise, their time, their attention, advice. And it really was my own fear that I had to conquer. I don't know if anybody has heard of imposter syndrome, but that was very real for me. And it took a lot of work and feedback from people, a lot of networking, and a lot of support. So it's been wonderful. I mean, I've done everything but sell this stuff. I've done research, I've done development, I've done lending and investment management. And I've had a lot of help along the way. Let me tell you one story about what I did in 2012, talking about recessions. That was a fun thing. I had a 6-week opportunity. I knew I wanted to move from Boston to the West Coast, but I wasn't really sure where or for whom. And I had a 6-week odyssey where it was just me, my kids, my husband were left at home for 6 weeks.
That sounds wonderful.
I spent about a week in every metropolitan area in California, and I talked to everybody up and down the capital stack, from pension funds to pension fund advisors, to investment sales brokers, even service companies, service managers. And I had a marketing plan, I called it, where I was marketing myself. And in it, I had very specific goals for what I wanted. I wanted to be an asset manager for one of these companies. And I had a company list. And the funny thing was, every time I showed somebody my company list, I got an answer or some kind of inside baseball where they said, oh, no, you don't want to work for that company. And I also asked, who's missing from my list? And I got such great insight there. And people were so generous with their time. It was wonderful. So my advice to people, and this is from one of my mentors from Boston, he said, you have 15 opportunities a week to network. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner 5 days a week, or happy hour, whatever it is. If you do 3 a week, your network is going to explode exponentially. And, you can ask people pretty much just ask for help. That's another good.
That's fantastic. I love that. And, to the fear factor that you talked about before, I think that's where a good mentor can really play a role because, for mine, my first mentor is still my best one. And he pushed me to do things that I never would have done on my own. Sometimes a good mentor can see potential in you before you, even realize it yourself. So
that's it.
I think to young professionals, we always advise them to connect yourself with somebody who can do that for you. Because invariably they'll push you to do something before you ever feel ready.
Yeah. And that's the other thing that I love. Back in 2013, I think I was doing some work up in the Stanford commercial campus up there. And so I went into Facebook campuses regularly. And one of the signs on the wall there is Sheryl Sandberg's, done is better than perfect. Mm-hmm. And that's huge. Again, like Annemarie said, you don't have to be linear. If so many women, I feel like they need to have everything in order before they go out and present themselves. You don't. People are forgiving. And the other thing is so many people just don't care about some aspects. They want to know what you can do for them. And so go out, get out of your comfort zone, like Judy said. I think it's so important to do that. And you know what? The other thing is just have fun. It's so much fun to get out and talk to people.
Yeah, and to network with people, especially now post-pandemic. As
Yes.
we're going to conferences, there are happy reunions, and I think it's important for young professionals who are just starting out to get comfortable just sitting next to a stranger at a lunch table and, oh, what do you do? And staying in touch with them on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Because that's how you build your network, and it's important.
Yeah.
So that's terrific, Lexi. So in addition to networking, mentoring, any other steps you would advise women or men, for that matter?
Yeah, absolutely. And here's one thing that I came to kind of late in my career, and that is once a year, really do make it a point, or even more often if you can do it, make it a point to write down everything you've done. Like, make a deal list and make a skills list. So, write down what you have worked on that year, and then write down what skills it took to work on that. And keep that. Your career is going to be long, and you're going to forget what you worked on. So just keep that list and keep adding to it.
I love that. That's perfect. Okay, thanks, Lexi. We're going to let you go, and we're going to bring you back on at the end, and we're going to move on.
Thanks, Diane.
Yep. Hi, Christina.
Hi, Diane.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. All right, we're going to jump right into the broker segment, which has a reputation for being one of the most challenging segments of commercial real estate for women.
It's pretty.
I would love to hear your thoughts as we reflect on the history of women in commercial real estate. Again, like, where have you seen progress specifically in brokerage, and where do you think we still have work to do?
Yeah, I jumped into the industry more than 30 years ago in the late 80s when everything was pretty much male, stale, pale. It was really male dominated. It's all the cliches you'd ever heard about, the things you see in the movies. To be a young woman getting in the industry at that point, you really had to have a thick skin. There was really no sense of belonging. There were no female role models to speak of, and that's all changed. And that just makes me feel so good, because it is an industry that I feel is tailor-made for women in many ways. Women have a completely different perspective than men, and our clients want to hear that type of voice. And what's happening now is fabulous for women to get into the industry, because most of the big brokerage houses are very DE&I focused, wanting to make sure that the doors are opening. I am on the real estate school advisory board for UNLV. I'm chair of their advisory committee, and we just had a meeting this morning. We talked about the fact that we have got to get into the high schools earlier, get into the freshman class earlier in college, to make sure that people are aware of this industry, because there's really no better career from my point of view nowadays, especially for women, because you can set up your own flexible schedule. You can have a kid, you can have unlimited earning potential, and you can really chart your own course with no limit to what you want to achieve. So I think what's happening now is really terrific.
Yeah, that's great. Gives us a lot of hope. One stat from CRE's research is that only 9% of C-suite positions are held by women. One of the things you and I talked about last week was that firms aren't necessarily filling the pipeline, with young professional women and getting them kind of into that. But seeing women in the leadership roles definitely helps change that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that unfortunately, the commercial real estate industry, especially brokerage, has been fairly late to the game in creating diversity in its leadership roles. And I know that our firm is very focused on it. I'm excited to be in a leadership role after 20 years in brokerage myself. I've done everything from development to selling deals, investment property sales, asset management, the whole thing. But I think that the old way was that we would bring people into this industry in kind of a master slave scenario, and women aren't well suited to that type of a setup. You'd have an old broker, a senior broker, who would bring in somebody that was a junior broker. We used to call them runners, because literally you'd run and get them coffee, you'd run and get their dry cleaning. I mean, it was a ridiculous model. And we didn't really prime people for leadership. So there was nobody in the pipeline. It was just kind of like, we want to have brokers, and then we'll solve for the managers in a separate subset of people. But yet, who knows the brokerage business better than the people who've been working in brokerage? If they rise and decide they're tired of pushing around pieces of paper for money, maybe there's people that want more out of their life. And so we found that there are good people out there within the ranks at all the various companies who do want to get into leadership. And it's really something that I think is changing the industry. And I think when we see women in the C-suite or as CEO at major brokerage companies, we'll know that we've arrived. But we're finally realizing that if we want to have the diversity that's necessary to really succeed in life and with our clients, we need to have women of all color. We need to have LGBTQ representation, women with disabilities, people of all steps of life, because our clients value that perspective and that diverse voice. So, it's not just about being gritty or having a thick skin anymore. Women are finding a place in commercial real estate because there are visible female leaders and there is more of a sense of belonging. So it's something I'm very passionate about. And so I lead a group at Cushman & Wakefield of young elite brokers that we're trying to help rise by providing them mentorship and a path forward so that they can see where their path to success is. And it's very rewarding.
That's wonderful. I want to share one comment that Wendy Mann made, the CEO of Crew Network, but I'll start with, and this is on the gender equity topic. I'm a big movie buff, and at the start of the Oscars, Wendy Schumer said that the Academy hired 3 women to host because it was cheaper than hiring 1 man. And it reminded me that when Crew came out with their compensation study, which they do every 5 years, they recognized that the pay gap between men and women in commercial real estate is 34%. And in a recent interview between Wendy and someone you and I both like and admire, Spencer Levy at CBRE, he asked her to look into the crystal ball, and she said, I don't necessarily see our industry getting to equal pay, but she's hopeful that they narrow the gap to 20%. But what I wanted to bring up with you today was she specifically mentioned the broker segment and said that she would really like to think that we will see a shift in the commission base on the brokerage side of the house so that more women are attracted to going into that segment, and that they go in with this entrepreneurial spirit, that really, to use her words, would take the brokerage sector by storm.
Yeah, I think that companies have to lean into making it a more attractive transition in learning the business, really making sure that talent, as they're coming out of college, have an opportunity to learn the business with some sort of a stipend or a draw against future commissions or a draw against the team's revenue. We're doing that at Cushman & Wakefield. I know CBRE does that. There's others that are leaning into that. If we don't do that, this won't be an attractive industry for women because we're just not the same type of risk takers as men. Maybe it's the way that we're biologically wired. Maybe I don't really know. You could go down 100 different rabbit holes on that and get very controversial, but I would love to make it a smoother transition for women so that they knew that they could stand up on their own 2 feet. Right now, as it stands, the history of it has been only a few brave women have said, I'll bet on myself because I know that I can make it. But in this business, when you go into brokerage, you're generally digging a 1 year to 2 year hole for yourself. And in the old days, you started out with a phone book and no pay, 100% commission. And you had to figure out how to survive. And if you didn't have savings or a spouse or a parent to support you, you really weren't going to make it. There was just really no path to success. And that's why you see in the ranks now, people who have risen because they knew someone in the industry or their parent was in the industry, or there was a safety net for them. And that's created a very exclusive workforce in the brokerage arena where it's been exclusionary to women or people of color. And so that's what needs to change. And that's what we're looking at, is finding ways to bridge that gap so that people can have their first couple of years and be very successful. And then by year 3, they're making their own money and they're ready to launch and be their own broker.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And then, one final comment in terms of the pandemic, what did kind of working from home mean to young professionals entering the broker space? That had to be very challenging to not have that office environment.
Absolutely.
Isolation.
It kind of depended if you were on the brokerage side or the support side. I think the support side liked the opportunity of being able to kind of work from home, get some things accomplished in the household, maybe watch their kids and have that flexibility to get things done while a child is napping or down for the evening or that sort of thing. But it does still come with the burden of you're never not working because it becomes this elastic day that never stops. For brokers, to your point, it's a very isolating experience. Our company did a study with all of our clients worldwide as well as our own employees, and we published a report on return to office and being in the COVID environment and the comparison. And what we found was that the hardest hit people were those who were in their 20s or just entering the workforce, because they didn't have the social aspect of learning the business, collaborating, having creative collisions with each other. And a lot of times they're working in an environment where they're with roommates and they have to be on Zoom, and they have only a bedroom or a shared bedroom or something like that. And it was just a very different experience. People who already had grown kids had a wonderful experience. And so it was a very polarizing report, and it was fascinating that our youngest demographic really have had the hardest time and really do appreciate coming back if we can find a way to bridge that transition correctly.
Right, right. Such a tough time. Okay, thank you for that, Christina.
Thank you.
We will bring you back shortly, and we'll bring on Heidi.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, Heidi. Thank you for being here. Someone else from the East Coast.
Yes.
Let's start with wisdom. This is a question Judy also fielded. So looking back at your career with the wisdom that you have today, what's one thing that you wish you knew back when you were just starting out?
I would say not to be scared if you don't know what comes next. And I have to remind myself of this all the time. It's not just something for when you're starting out. And you really have to think about how many good things have come of change along the way, even if it doesn't necessarily feel comfortable when you're kind of staring into the abyss. And I would also say, don't be afraid of making mistakes, because very, very few paths have absolutely no way out. So very few choices are permanent, whether it's with our career or personal choices. And it's okay to try something new. And it's equally okay to say after a year or two, doesn't work out or it's not for you, to move on. The thing I would also mention about that is don't think of something as a mistake. If it was maybe not the best choice, you can think of it as an opportunity to learn and to pivot. So even if you don't necessarily know what your next step is, think of your ability to reflect, take what you know, and then pivot. And literally sometimes it's just looking in the other direction. I would echo something that Lexi said, which is really the importance of networking. And you don't even need to think of it so formally as networking, but just really talking to people and learning from their experiences. And you'd really be surprised how many people are willing to help you, even if you don't know them and you're a perfect stranger. Have the courage to introduce yourself to somebody in your industry, perhaps somebody who has more experience than you do, that maybe you've admired from afar. Ask if you can take them to coffee. Ask if you can connect with them on LinkedIn and arrange a 10 or 15-minute conversation. I think it's something that's so much easier to do today with email and LinkedIn. And you'll find that people are generally very, very receptive to help. So, when in doubt, look to others for the answer.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and getting over the fear of it, because flattery, when you're meeting somebody that you look up to, flattery goes a long way.
If you're absolutely at a live event,
I really loved your presentation, Heidi. Can we connect on LinkedIn?
And I'll always say yes. So as soon as somebody sends me a note, with more than, that's not just blank, I will always connect. And if somebody wants to talk, I think it's really important, to pass on the wisdom that I've learned or to pass on what I've learned from my mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. I always, when we're talking to our mentees, we kind of associate, learning how to network and building your network on LinkedIn as a 401k, that the earlier that you start in the career, the better, because you never know what pivot your career is going to take or when you might need somebody in your network.
That is a great way to think about it. It pays dividends in the future.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about inspiration. If you had to name a contemporary role model who inspires you, who would it be?
So I thought about this question for a while, and it's not so much role models to me as trailblazers, because I really admire people who are willing to carve a new path. And my initial answer might not be my final answer. The person who came to mind first, of course, was somebody who just passed and is no longer with us, which is Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But then I had to wonder, why do we constantly move to Ruth Bader Ginsburg and not Sandra Day O'Connor, for example? And kind of putting all politics aside, I think being the first person to do something, no matter what the feat, is just so significant. But that being said, I think they're both great role models. And I would bring it full circle, even to somebody like Ketanji Brown Jackson. I listened to her opening remarks, and it was so incredibly moving and so heartfelt. And I just think somebody who brings that much passion to whatever they're doing can really be inspirational.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that. Next question is one that Christina also fielded. When we think about the progress for women in commercial real estate, and back to the CRE stat that only 9% of C-suite positions are held by women. What do you see needing to change in order for that to increase?
I think we are the ones that are responsible for making change. It would be great if others allowed us entry and made the change easy for us. But if not, I think we really have to take responsibility. And I would say sometimes women can be their own worst enemies, individually. I've often said, if somebody else thinks you can do the job, you can do it, no matter, even if we don't necessarily believe in ourselves. And if somebody else thinks that we can't do the job, we can still do it. So no matter what somebody else says, the answer should be yes. And we really have to think of serving as our own coach and player and cheerleader at the same time. And that can be hard to do, to look at things from those various different lenses. But I think it's really important to have that attitude. I think one other thing, when we heard some others talking about leaning in or imposter syndrome, I think if sometimes we don't have a seat at the table, we're the ones that need to pull up a chair. And if it makes others uncomfortable, that's okay. Literally to say, is it okay if I join this meeting? And even if you're just observing, I think it's really important to sometimes physically have a seat at the table. So again, you can learn from what's happening typically behind closed doors.
Mm-hmm. I love that. When I was on an event with Annemarie's company last year, we answered a question about who we look up to or who inspired us. And, by and large, they were other women. But one person that I named was someone I mentioned before, which is Spencer Levy. Yep. And the reason was because he does a lot to champion women and to move a seat to the table for them. So, for example, he spoke on an event on a panel that I was moderating in New York, and he brought a woman from his firm with him. And I just thought it was so classy to do that and to create opportunities and open doors. So it's not just women supporting other women, but it's important for men in commercial real estate to make room at the table.
Absolutely.
So perfect. All right. Thank you, Heidi. Now let's go ahead and bring the other panelists back, and we will answer the final question. And then we also have some comments. So we'll take questions from the audience in the time remaining. But first, I would love to hear from each of you. One piece of advice, call it 25 words or less, that you would give to the next generation of leaders, regardless of gender, male or female. We will start with you, Annemarie.
My advice is go with your gut. If you're happy, if you're not, and follow that compass that tells you that you're doing the right thing, or make the change and move to plan C.
I love that. Judy, how about you?
My advice is once you've made it, reach back and bring someone else along. You hear a lot about women saying, I had to get there on my own. You can do it too, and I'm not going to help you out. It's like wrong thing to do. Bring somebody else along, and it just makes you feel so good when you see them succeed, and then they may become a client or who knows what, but it just makes you feel good to bring someone else along. And so do that for people.
I love that. Rising tide lifts all boats, right, Judy?
Yes, exactly.
Lexi?
So it's actually two things. I'm sorry, I never conform. And they're related. So really, it's express gratitude for the time and effort and expertise that people give you. Just thank them. And, they remember you when you do that. And so the second part is related to that. And that is, please follow up. I know people say they're going to follow up and they don't. It's so important, even if it's a text.
Perfect. Christina, advice for the next generation?
I think that the most important thing I've had to learn is don't give up when you fail. That's how we learn. We're a society obsessed with winning and success, and the winners are usually the losers that have now learned how to win but they lost time and time again. You just don't know that part of the story.
Mm-hmm. Very good. I agree. Heidi, advice?
I just read this the other day, so it's not my own, but I thought it really spoke to me, which is harness energy from the thoughts that terrorize you. So you can.
I like it.
I loved it. Again, not mine, but it really resonated with me. And I thought, your thoughts can really make you freeze in place, or they can be a boost and kind of a shot of courage. And it really means, it's okay to be fearful, but what you do with it is up to you.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So great advice here from all of you. Hopeful comments that I've heard are that there are more women who can act as role models for our daughters, which I think is great. Seeing more women in leadership positions and seeing more diversity, even beyond gender. When people see other people like them, it gives them hope and inspiration. One thing that I wanted to share that we were talking about before we went live was just how ridiculously hard the pandemic was on young professionals who are just starting out in this industry, who really need that face-to-face interaction with their colleagues and clients to build relationships and expand their knowledge and get comfortable speaking up. And, that's where I think if you are young and starting out and you don't have a mentor, you should be really, the best thing I think you can do for your career is to find a good one who's going to have your back, who's going to see potential in you, who's going to help you get over fear. I've had the benefit of having several in my career, and I'm so much better for it. And to get more comfortable talking about yourself, and connecting, especially with women, like all the panelists here, all the attendees who aren't connected with them on LinkedIn should go ahead and do that. So we have a little bit of time. I'm going to take a look at some of the comments and questions and see if there are any questions that we have to field. We have a couple people looking up imposter syndrome, so that was something that resonated with people. Lots of gratitude, lots of good advice.
Did we lose Diane?
We may have.
Looks like we did.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to pick up on a comment that was made. And Lexi, I love your comment about having, your itinerary of what you had done in the last year and what you learned and so forth. And I do believe the pandemic was really hard on younger people, but some people have also been able to focus on things that they couldn't have focused on before. And I forget now who said it, maybe Heidi or Christina, about writing notes and saying thank you, even if it's a text. And I just got a text from one of my mentees, a minority woman in the industry. She said, I just wanted to let you know, in the midst of all this, I was recently promoted to associate principal. I have you to thank for your guidance, gentle pushing, and reminder to be direct and ask for what I want. And nice. I just thought, the text made my day. And the advice goes with exactly what we're saying. It's not us telling you to do it, but it's the third person endorsement. Like, yeah, that worked for me.
That's wonderful. And that goes back to Lexi's point of practicing gratitude.
Yeah.
Every chance you get. And that's all part of relationship building too. Yeah. So
real quick, I just wanted to lob in there also for people who are have a little trepidation about, getting out there and talking to people and asking someone for coffee. One way to maybe do it is to bring a friend. Then you're not so uncomfortable, and you're, normally people, if they're going to give you their time, they don't mind someone else coming too.
Mm-hmm.
I'll also put in another thought too on feeling confident, especially ahead of an important conversation, an important presentation. Diane, you may remember a few years ago when Crew Network had its convention in New York. One of the speakers was Amy Cuddy, who has an outstanding TED Talk on power posing. And just a 2-minute, a 2-minute preparation ahead of something that's got you nervous. And it's just standing there in a natural pose that animals and victorious people take, some form like that. Do this privately, and it sends your body and your brain the signal that you've got this and you're going to do it. It's very, very empowering. It really is. And it's great for those last minute jitters that all of us have. So.
That's perfect. I love that. That was a really good one.
Yeah.
So forming connections is what's really going to save you, though. You know, and I think forming them early makes your career journeys better. It's going to make our industry better by just being more diverse and inclusive. And I think these conversations like the one we're having will extend beyond Women's History Month. And they're important. You know, I encourage everyone here to do the same, you know, to have these kinds of conversations, to seek out inspiration, to be proactive about it, because that's, you know, that's really going to foster awareness and education. And that's going to lead to the progress that we've all seen in the industry, and hopefully the progress that is to come. You know, I think with the pandemic, it shook our snow globe in so many ways. And I think, you know, the snow hasn't even settled yet. And for us as women, my hope is that it gives us a chance to redefine what the future culture is, with inclusivity and with female advocacy in mind. I don't think any of us know quite what it's going to look like in commercial real estate after the dust does settle, but I think we can all commit on this call, you know, and in the broader industry to figuring it out together. So with that, you know, I thank you, Annemarie and Judy and Lexi and Christina and Heidi for being here. I know how busy that you all are. I hope to see you all in person at an event this year. I would like to thank LightBox for championing diversity and inclusion and really giving our council the resources that we need to foster conversations like this, and to dedicate ourselves to moving forward and moving the needle for greater equity and diversity and inclusion for women and other groups who are underrepresented. So to our audience, thank you so much for being here, and we hope to have you on a future LightBox event. Thanks, everybody. Take care and stay well.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.